guys, welcome to my first book review of 2021. Today we are going to be talking about the absolutely fantastic Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. Now, Senlin Ascends is just great. Now, Senlin Ascends, as it says on the cover, is one of Mark Lawrence's favorite books of all time. Just let that sink in for a second. I can definitely see why this is one of his favorites of all time. This is a really, really great book. And I know it's probably not the smartest thing for me to do to say that up front, but this is going to be a lot of gushing, a lot of just me constantly obsessing over how much I really enjoy this book. And I knocked this book out in around a day, in just 2 sittings. Knocked this book out in 2 sittings. I wish I could have done it in 1, but I was just too tired. Staying up till 4 in the morning to read steampunk fantasy is a bit, it's a bit tiring. But I absolutely love this book, and I just So, what is this book about? Well, it is about Thomas Senlin, who is the headmaster at his fishing village, his small fishing village, and his new bride, Maria. They've been recently married, and they are taking their honeymoon at the Tower of Babel, which is just this huge, monolithic sort of just tower that just juts up into the sky and is absolutely almost like a character on its own, and a deep, multifaceted character. And that was such an enjoyable aspect to this book that I really expected, but sort of my expectations were really blown out of the water, but I'll get to that in a second. So this isn't a spoiler. This is literally on the back of the book, so please do not hate me. But Thomas Senlin and his wife Maria are going on their honeymoon to the Tower of Babel, and just when they get there, Thomas loses Maria. What happens to Maria is not exactly clear, and I'm glad that it's not, because isn't that the point of the story? So he has to go on a journey to find her. Obviously, that is a very natural, simple reaction to have, because this is his wife. He cares about her very much, despite him being very sort of stodgy. I don't want to say unfeeling, but he's a very solitary, very stoic sort of person, and he doesn't really show very much emotion, and so he really does care about his wife. That much is very clear. And so he loves his wife very much and wants to go find her. Now, the Tower of Babel is, like I said before, a monolith all on its own, and has many what are called ringdoms, and this book covers 4 of them. Each part of the book is a different ringdom, and that's why they call it Senlin Ascends, because, he ascends the ringdoms. And so Senlin has to befriend lots of people to help him get up, and find Maria. And obviously, this is definitely not as easy as you'd think. It is a very complicated task, much more so than you'd expect, and I think that that's one of the things that makes this story really interesting. So it's got a very simple premise, but the execution, sort of how it plays out, the rest of the story, the rest of the 389 pages. It's a short book, but for its page time, there is so much to enjoy here. There's so much. I don't want to say crowded into this book, but there's so much within this book. It's just astounding to me that Mr. Bancroft was able to fit all of this, all of these beautiful characters, Senlin's arc, and just the tower, getting to know the tower and what's in it, what it is. And even then, you don't fully know what it is. And I hear that you find out more about that in subsequent books, because this is supposed to be a 4-book series with the 4th book coming out later this year. But so it's just amazing to me that he was able to pull that off in such a convincing and awesome fashion. Now, the first thing I want to get into here are the characters. The characters are absolutely fantastic in this book. The book focuses on just the one POV for Senlin, but throughout this story, he encounters many new people, many new friends, and they all have very distinct, memorable personalities, and not one character really bleeds with another. It's not really hard to distinguish who is who. You know, Edith is Edith, and Adam is Adam, and Fingal is, he's Fingal. And Taro is probably the most unique character in this book. He's probably, I wouldn't say he's out of place, but he's very unique. You'll see. But it amazes me how each of these characters have such a fully realized 3-dimensional personality with their own motivations, their own desires and wants and needs. It absolutely blew my mind how I never once confused who these characters were in my mind, because there's a lot of these characters thrown at you. It's not like Malazan or anything. I'm not saying that it's like a big epic fantasy, but Senlin encounters a lot of people along the way, and I mean, I think there's probably 6 or 7 people that he meets over the course of this story, and usually that may be hard to keep them straight in such a short book, and while plenty of other things are going on, but the entire page time, Bancroft manages to fully flesh out each of these characters in such a distinct way that you can really understand and fully sort of realize who these characters are, who these people are, because they feel more like people than characters. They do real things. They're selfish, and they're out for themselves. And the way that Bancroft utilizes these characters within the setting of the tower, along with his beautiful prose, is just mind-boggling to me. I've never seen any book like this before. I've never seen any book written like this before, with characters like this before. I love this book. I love this book. What else is there to say? I mean, there's plenty more to say, and I'm going to say it. In the second part of this book, there is a very surreal quality to the environment and the setting and sort of the dialogue, what's going on. I swear that if there was like an adaptation of this, it wouldn't be so much of a stretch to say that David Lynch could direct it, because it's so surreal and not necessarily Lynchian in its quality and how it's told, but it's just so odd. I didn't think that it was weird, used in a derogatory context, or bad. It was just surreal, and it was very odd, very different. Not out of place or anything, it was just something new and almost refreshing in a way. I very, very much enjoyed reading this book, and the second part, while it wasn't my favorite of the book, could definitely be enjoyed on its own because of the very distinct surreal quality that it has. And I found this character that was introduced in that part to be probably the second most compelling and interesting character, second only to Senlin. And it's absolutely wild to me how fully realized Senlin was, and I hear a lot of complaints about his character and that he's very naive and that he doesn't really want to change or anything like that, but I think that that's a really important part of his character, is one man, one person, one soul, a personality going up against this huge monolithic thing that has its own standards, has its own rules, but at the same time has no rules, has no standards, and is almost chaotic and anarchic in a way. And so the clashing of these two different ideals, these two different settings, of Senlin and his very acute, very precise, and sort of intelligent, intellectual personality versus the huge, vastly complex, and almost unpredictable nature of the tower and the people within it is just wow. In many ways, I actually really identified with Senlin. I really felt that he was a relatable character, and I think that his arc in this story was very compelling because it wasn't so much of a dramatic change throughout the story, but it was more about this one person going up against, like I said before, this huge unknown environment and holding on to who he is at the core, but learning to adapt at the same time to this new place, to this new way of living. And I thought that that was just wow. And it was absolutely phenomenal in its execution. I actually really identified with Senlin in different parts of his character because, like Senlin, I can be a bit stubborn, and just ask anyone who knows me. I am a very stubborn person, and Senlin is also very stubborn. I noticed, and I wouldn't say that he's naive. I would say that he's stubborn and that he wants to hold on to who he is, and he believes that he is good enough and that he's smart enough. He even thinks that he's a bit smarter than other people, a bit smarter than the other tourists who come to the Tower of Babel, because he's done so much research all his life, and he thinks that that makes him better than these other people. And I tend to have that behavior at times, and it's a bit condescending, it's a bit rude, it's a bit presumptuous, and I found that Senlin and I had that in common a bit, but at the same time, Senlin's wife and my girlfriend shared a lot of very similar traits. Both of these women are very strong, very independent, and free, very high-spirited people who just love to enjoy life, and very free-spirited and very light-hearted people. And I found that Maria was just almost like a complete contrast of Senlin, but that it was a beautiful relationship, and that you can understand that they really do care about each other. They really love each other, even though they haven't known each other too long. And I thought that that was a very relatable, very easily identifiable aspect of this book and their relationship in particular. And I sort of really connected with that. I didn't expect to, because I don't typically connect with relationships in the books that I read, but this one in particular did a very good job of that. And Mr. Bancroft deserves to be highly commended for that, because his work with their relationship in just the short amount of time that he actually deals with it, and that he's got scenes of them together throughout the book, that was just very surprising to me how well constructed their relationship was, and it felt natural, it felt real, and it felt like they were two real people who really were in love and who really did care about each other. And I also really connected with Senlin in the aspect that he and I both don't like to go to very large public gatherings, and we always find something to do. Senlin has his fireplace. You'll know that reference if you read the book. And I take a book with me almost every single place that I go. If I leave the house, you can damn well bet that I have a book in my hand if I'm leaving. So I found that very interesting that there was just that similarity, and I really connected with that. Like I said, I read this book in about 2 sittings, and I think that something that contributed to that in my reading experience was the highly immersive nature of this book, which was sort of a factor of the writing style mixed with the nature of the tower and the environment, because you've got the market, which is outside the tower, which is exactly what it sounds like, a market, but when you actually get into the basement, it's just a very gross, very dank, very just environment. And then you get to the parlor, which is that's all I have to say about that. And then you get to the baths, which is almost like a city all on its own, and it feels more like a real place. It's still got its very own unique, surreal quality to it. Nothing like the parlor at all, but I did feel like that was very well done, and that is where I come into a bit of a negative, is when Senlin gets into the baths. And for a little bit there, it does drag. I wouldn't say that it's boring, it's a bit slow. Of course, when you get to the end, when you get to the last probably like 20-30 pages or so, it all makes sense. The middle being a bit slow, the section where he's in the baths, it was a bit slow, but you understand why, and it all makes sense, and it was deliberate. So I can excuse that. I was never bored. I never wanted to put the book down. That's what I'm trying to say. Despite that slow bit in the middle, I was still interested in the characters. I was still interested in Senlin's plight and what was going on, but it did just drag just a little bit. And so this book isn't perfect, and that is probably my biggest problem with it. Aside from that, I have just one other, sort of nitpicky sort of negative with the book, and that is about toward the end of the book. I won't give any plot details, but there are some events that happen that rely largely on convenience and coincidence, and I understood at the time when I was reading it why that was happening, and what needed to happen, and Senlin sort of built it up. Bancroft built these events through Senlin's POV, so you knew it was going to happen, and you knew that these things were going to be sort of a convenient intertwining, just at the right moment. So you can understand that and almost excuse it, but at the same time, it just felt a little too obvious, a little too on the nose, almost rushed. And that sort of takes away from it a little bit, but not enough for me to be, annoyed or bothered by it. I still enjoyed the action that was at the end of the book. This book has very little action, but the thing is, if you're reading this book for action, you're going to be disappointed. That's not something that I was looking for coming into this book. There is a bit of action at the end, and it is enjoyable because you care about these characters and you don't want anything to happen to them. You don't want them to be hurt. And there was one time at the end where I thought a certain character was dead, and I was so mad. I was like, you gotta be kidding, what? And then the relief that came over me when I found out this character was not dead. Whew. Because like I said before, all these characters are very fleshed out, very three-dimensional, and it is just a testament to Bancroft's ability as a writer. He's a very, very talented writer, and his prose is beautiful, absolutely gorgeous and stunning, and it just feels classical without being overly wordy, and it doesn't feel like there's too much description. There's not too much of, being in a character's head and just over explaining things, but it gets everything it wants to get across, and it does that in a beautifully written way. And I think that the prose is one of my favorite things about this book, second only to the characters. I think that Bancroft could write just about anything and I would just eat it up. I would just absolutely love it. And I am really, really looking forward to getting to the second book, which is The Arm of the Sphinx, and then getting to the third book, The Hod King. And now, if you don't know what a Hod is, let me tell you something. Read Senlin Ascends. You will find out what a Hod is. And then I am looking forward to the fourth book, the final book, which makes me sad because I know I've only read one book in this series, 1/4 of the series, but I love it and I don't want it to end. But it will end in November, I think. But I am really looking forward to The Fall of Babel, which is what the fourth and final book is called. And I really highly encourage you to pick up Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. And if you like this review, please like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Goodreads, Twitter, and Instagram so you can see what I'm up to. And all the links for those platforms are in the description. And I hope that you will just, please, I really hope that you love this book as much as I did. So thank you as always for watching, and I hope I will see you next time.